Hello.
Hey man,
Hey, how's it going?
hi, how are you doing?
I'm doing good, thanks. And you?
Nice to see your work. It's amazing.
Thanks so much.
So thank you so much. First of all, I'm really grateful to you that you have come here and you are spending your time to share your wisdom and knowledge on animation and talking about animation career as well. So I hope that this will help a lot for the beginners. Especially you might know that the beginners don't have any idea about this animation, and when we get into the career, then we know that, oh, this is how it works. So this is how it is done. So
Mm.
learning it in the institute or wherever, it is way different than what we do in the real work environment. Let's start. So I would like to just ask you at the beginning, so about yourself, if you could share anything about yourself, how you started your animation journey. Did you have did you had this thing already in your head going on? Like, I want to do something into animation, or this was just a luck by chance kind of somebody told you and you just got into this.
So for me, it was definitely it was a more of a by chance thing, I
Oh
think.
my
Um, because I didn't really know it was like an option or like a job I could do. When I was for most of my time in school, basically. I knew that I liked drawing, and I liked watching animated movies, but I didn't really like think that I didn't realize that someone is making these movies. They don't just appear. Um, and so yeah, so for most of the time, I always had like a passion for like, drawing and art and even acting. But I thought that my best bet would be to do something like architecture because um, that was like the only job I thought I could do with like drawing. And so that was like the plan for the longest time, was just to like uh, use up all my skills and interests to get into like architecture. But sometime around like the end of um, high school, like close to like when you're starting to select your universities, um, I we had like a guest speaker come to our school, and he worked on the I think he worked on the Dark Knight, one of those Batman films. Might have been that one. And he essentially kind of came to the school and gave us a talk about how the visual effects for that movie were created. And that's the first time I like ever saw some kind of like breakdown of like um, an animation movie or something. And that's when I realized, oh, this is like an actual job that people are doing. Um, and from that moment, like I went home and I was just like, guys, I think I don't want to do architecture. I think I want to do this thing called animation that I know nothing about. And
Yeah,
luckily, like my parents were really supportive about that, and they said, okay, let's look into it. Let's see what this animation thing is about. And uh, a lot of story steps later,
yeah,
I ended up doing animation, and I haven't regretted it. So,
absolutely.
so
That's great. So I was really surprised because whoever I'm talking to, even myself, I did not know anything about animation. So this is like somebody has come into our life and just guided us that this is something for you, and just try it if you like it, and that could be the best thing you could do in your life.
exactly, yeah. That's why it's really like it's really important to do things like you're doing and kind of share
Yes,
the
absolutely.
knowledge and the awareness that like this is
Because I
like a career that people can get into.
Yes, because most of the students believe that if they only get the degree or the education, then only they can succeed in life or
Mm,
something good. But this is something really, really great. I feel animation is really a great industry. Like, people can share, people can be free, and
mhm.
they do some or great creative work, which they will be applauded for that work as well and recognized for that work. So it's really a great industry to work in.
Yeah, and there's so much work right now as well. It's like a really great time
Yes.
in the industry.
So what made you come to this stage? Like, what did you feel when I asked you about joining the show? So what did you feel? Why did you join the show? What got connected to you?
Oh, this talk. So yeah, like we kind of touched upon, I think it's important to kind of share um the kind of like awareness of like mainly like first of all even just like the awareness so people know that this is like an option if they're interested in the things we spoke about, if they're interested in art, if they're interested in like art and technical things, um just to know that it's an option and it's like a stable career because there's like so much work that they can get into and enjoy like the actual work that you do can be something fun. And so yeah, it's I think it's really important to share the awareness because a lot of people still don't fully know like what animation is. And also like wherever you can like spread some of the information and education about how to approach animation and how to like workflow things like that. Making that information accessible as well um, is quite useful for because not everyone can like afford like a university or an online course.
Yeah.
So yeah, kind of also just sharing some of the general information is quite useful, I think.
I feel like, yes, why am I doing this? Because I feel like there should be somebody to guide. Like, we have courses and everything, but then they are not only aware about those things, like how does it work? Is it for me or not? Am I going to do this, or this is going to be a career or not? So we have courses everywhere in the world, but then we don't know. We are not aware that is this something for me, or is this something I can make a career out of it? So for that thing, we need to share to the people that this is how,
Exactly.
that is the way, very, very important thing, I believe. And in India, like there are very few, like handful of institutes, if I talk about, they are coaching into animation. And still people learn everything, which is what I want. I'm more concerned, like they should directly have that knowledge or maybe the awareness that this is how the industry works. So they don't need to learn everything. Like, you also believe that you don't need to learn modeling, texturing, everything. If you
All
are
right. Yeah.
more
Exactly.
interested into animation, then you should go for animation and maybe have a quicker start of your career.
Exactly. Yeah. It's true.
Yes. So I saw your sketches. They are really great. So you told like you are surprisingly into animation. So did you have those skills earlier, like drawing?
Um. Yeah. I used to. When I was younger, I used to mainly draw. Like I would draw my favorite characters from TV, or I would draw my own comic books sometimes too when I was a kid. I used to be into French, um, like French comic books, French characters, growing up because I grew up in like a French kind of uh, French colony in Africa. And so we had a lot of like the French comics and things like that, like Asterix and Obelix and uh, Smurfs. um, and so yeah, I grew up kind of drawing quite a lot. And from drawing, I kind of got into doing like fine art for a little bit. But even in like when I did fine art, I was terrible at painting. I whenever I would do like a portrait, I would like do it all in like color pencils. So I would always just be drawing, even when I'm coloring. Um, and yeah, and then it kind of like through art, I got into kind of like sculpting, and through sculpting, I got into like I started animating my clay sculptures. So I got into stop motion animation that way. And then I was like, oh man, this is so fun, but it's so slow and it takes so much like stuff. And I was always like searching for the easiest way to animate something. And somehow I ended up in 3D animation, which now it's debatable if it's the easiest way, but it's at least like what I like about it is that in 3D you have everything you need inside the computer, so you don't need to like buy a piece of string and a whole crane to make your character do something. You can just like move it in the computer and it's all just there.
So did
Yeah.
how did you learn animation? Like on your own, or you got into some online institutes or?
So I went to an a university for animation, but it's animation in terms of like the whole range of the pipeline. So it's kind of like what you were saying, where they didn't quite specialize in animation. They just taught us like this is what modeling is, this is what rigging is, this is what animation is. So it was more just like making us aware of every stage of the pipeline. But it wasn't quite like teaching us how to do that specific role. And uh, luckily, I was one of the people who I knew the whole time I was there, even when I was learning modeling and all that other stuff. I knew that I just wanted to do animation. Um, and so like outside of the lectures and things like that, that's where I would spend most of my time, was kind of searching online, looking at other people's like professional animators, like demo reels, like kind of looking at like the type of work they're doing, kind of frame by framing it, um, and trying to understand what's happening in the animation. And so yeah, essentially I was kind of just practicing it outside of lessons in my own time. And yeah, and then just looking at professional like animation movies and things like that, to try and understand like what's happening. So that's how I started. And there were also I was lucky to find some like animation meetup events I was in London at this point. And it was kind of like, it was ran by London ACM SIGGRAPH. And it would be basically all the people from like the VFX companies in London, like Framestore and MPC, DNEG. They would meet up in a bar, and kind of it would be a place where students can come up to them and socialize, meet them, talk to them, ask them questions. You could also show them some of your work, and they would give you feedback there, like in person. And so that was like, I think the first time I started to like get real animation feedback on some of my work. So that started getting me in the headspace of like how an animator thinks. So I started thinking about like, like storytelling poses and things like that, and getting the clarity in my shot across and things. And so that was like my first kind of step of officially starting to understand animation. Because before then I was just like on my own at home, just like looking at videos and doing stuff. Um, and then after I graduated, I was very, very lucky, and I managed to get an internship at Illumination in Paris, who make the Minions and Despicable Me.
Oh,
Um, yeah, Illumination Lucaf. And I did an internship with them for about 4 months. And was like, that was when I feel like I really started to understand how animation should work. And essentially after that internship, I was like, uh, I was offered to like stay at the company, but uh, from my understanding, like when you start at a big company like that, as an intern, your progress is quite slow because they don't want to throw you into the deep end and then you stress out and like you kind of spiral. But I feel like I needed that. So so I actually left the company after the internship, and because I like they had just given me all this amazing information about how to animate, and I wanted to like use it like immediately as much as I could to put it into practice. And so I decided like maybe it'll be better if I take maybe like 6 months to a year off, and kind of like just practice the stuff they taught me on my own, or maybe in a smaller company where I get that chance. Um, and and so yeah, that's what I did. First I kind of went home and like did some of my own like personal acting tests and things like that. And then I was fortunate to get a job in a smaller company where they literally just let me animate everything, because they only had like 12 animators. And between the Illumination internship and also the Richard Williams book, which was like a big tool for me, the Richard Williams Animators Survival Kit book. Between those two things, I think that's when I kind of unlocked the way I understand animation right now. And the I guess the key thing that I learned from the internship was to, as I'm starting my shot, is to think about like every single pose I'm putting down, like those first few poses, which I guess Richard Williams would say are like the storytelling poses, or the storytelling poses, and then the extremes, whatever, is to really like think about those poses and like what they mean, because that's when you're kind of setting the foundation of the shot. And if you're not really focused about like how you're setting up that foundation, then like all of the work that comes after can kind of just fall apart. Whereas before that internship, I used to just kind of just film myself, and then just like every 2 frames, I'll just like copy like whatever is moving without thinking. Is how I used to how I used to animate, which would take like so long. It would probably still end up looking kind of okay, but it would take like really long, and I would actually just not know what I'm doing. Like if you asked me, what, like, why are you putting this pose here, I'll just say, I don't know, it moved like that in the video, so that's what I'm doing. And so that was like the real big difference, before and after kind of going through that experience for me. Yeah, but overall, I'm kind of like a mix of self-taught and Richard Williams. Yeah,
I guess this is the same. This is a thing which happens to every animator as a beginner. We just keep on adding poses and we don't know why we are doing that. And there are so
yeah.
and then we get stuck what to change. And if we get corrections, then we are just lost.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So it is
You'd
very
have to like completely restart if you get any note.
so it's important to understand how to approach the shot, how to do it in a manner, in a step-by-step process, so that when you get some corrections at this phase, then you can correct it on that phase as well. So that
Exactly.
eases the process of doing it. So how long it had been like you are into this as an animator working?
Oh, I think I started in summer of 2015. So it is,
7 years.
what year is that? 2022? Yeah, so yeah, 70, yeah.
I
Around
would
the
like
world.
to ask you about your projects, what kind of projects you have worked on, and what is the project which you like the most, or maybe you got some personal connection uh, with that project. Might be you love
Mm,
it or you love working on such kind of a shot.
I see. So let's see. I have I'll just, I guess I'll just talk about the projects I've worked on at Sony. So I started at Sony on Smallfoot was my first movie, and that's, I had worked on another like Yeti movie at a small studio in Belgium just before I got the job at Sony to work on another Yeti movie. So it was like the year where like I think there was like 6 Yeti movies that came out or something,
Oh,
between like Leica and DreamWorks, and everyone was making like a movie about Yetis. But yeah, so I started on Smallfoot, and then I caught the tail end of Spider-Verse 1, which was the actual reason I had applied, was for Spider-Verse 1, but I had to do Smallfoot first. And so I did Smallfoot, then Spider-Verse, then Angry Birds 2, then the Mitchells, then Vivo, then the Sea Beast,
You have
then
got some
Spider-Verse
expressions.
2. Huh?
You have got some crazy expressions.
Yeah. Yeah, then most recently Spider-Verse 2 and extra stuff. But I think I guess my two favorite projects I worked on, one of them was like Spider-Verse was obviously like a movie that um really impacted the industry, like in the way people saw um kind of like how creative it can be with the style of the visual style of like animation, and that we don't need to be like limited to like um doing things a certain way. It was actually pretty cool because I remember while I was a student, I went to one of those festivals. I think it was FMX in Germany, and I remember showing one one of the mentors there. I think he was from Disney. But I remember showing him one of my one of the animations I did in my personal time, and it was like on twos, on stepped. And he looked at it and said, "Oh, it's cool, but like, are you going to finish it?" And I said, "It's finished. Like, I wanted it to be on stepped, like on twos, kind of like in anime." And then his feedback was kind of like, "Well, if you want to keep it on your reel, you should either like spline it fully, or remove it, because people will just think it's like unfinished animation." And I was like, "Oh, okay." Um, and then flash forward a few years, Spider-Verse comes out, and now like everyone's animating on stepped, and I was like, "Ah." um, but yeah, so I think Spider-Verse really like has a big impact, like for me, because of like it's a cool movie first of all, but just how much like it impacted the industry and broadened people's like perception of like what can qualify as like feature animation. Um, and so that's like one that has a special place for me. But in terms of the one movie I enjoyed working on the most, um, I still say it, and I think it was Angry Birds 2, because the director of that movie is just like the best director you can wish to work with. If anyone ever gets the chance to work with him, I recommend doing it, because he's just like an amazing director. Like, he puts out a really positive energy for the whole team. And yeah, so it was like a really great experience. Even though, like the movie isn't like at the top of people's lists, it's not like the first thing they would want to watch
But
or
it's great.
something. But in terms of like the experience of working on it, it was amazing. And I guess that's something like I started thinking about after working on that movie, like is that I guess as you get into your career as an animator, after working on like a few movies, like your mindset maybe kind of switches from like, I want to work on like the biggest, most popular movie. It changes from that to like, I just want to have a good time, like on the production I'm working on. So it's great to have some projects like Angry Birds 2, where like the whole crew is just really happy to work on this film, and it's just a great atmosphere. So I'd say, yeah, those two movies were
So if I
good
talk about
experiences.
animation, then like when a shot is assigned to you, so how do you start it? Do you directly, how do you approach it? What is your planning? What is the process you follow?
Cool. So yeah, so there's a bunch of different I guess styles of I guess there's a bunch of different types of shots, first of all. So the first thing I would do is kind of identify what like, is it an acting shot? Is it like a heavy like body mechanics shot, or is it kind of like a more of a motion graphics type of shot? And so if it's an acting shot, I think well, it's actually I have these examples here. Can you see my screen?
Yes, yes.
Awesome, cool. So this is one of the shots I animated on the Sea Beast.
I love this one. The audio is not there.
Okay, I guess it doesn't matter. But so essentially, so in this run of 3 shots, we have like the character kind of walking down some stairs while talking to these 3 characters right here. So in like with a shot, you know, like a sequence of shots like this, the first thing I would think of when I received this is, you know, like, okay, so what's happening in the shot? I'd say it's mainly acting, but there is a big part of like mechanics at the start with getting the character in position. So usually the first thing I do is to make sure, like, if this character's style of walk hasn't been established, I'll kind of do some tests to figure out like a speed, a pace that the character would walk that feels like natural for him. Like, is he like a character who likes to walk quite speedily around, or is he like quite slow and like um, contained? And so I would kind of figure out like a realistic speed the character can travel. And the first thing I would do is kind of like see if I need to adjust the layout, because just kind of like in 2D, you want to do most of your work to the camera of the final film. And so the first pass I do is just checking like, does the layout that we received work with what the director wants us to achieve in animation? So the first pass I usually do is like a quick pass of layout, because sometimes the layout, they might move things a little faster than is realistically possible. And so it's important to just like make sure the layout is working with the realistic speeding and moving character. And then the second thing I would do in a shot like this, once the layout is figured out, is I would actually, while listening to the audio, I would kind of like maybe just plan out the rhythm a little bit of the character's steps. So the character is talking, but he's also walking down the stairs. And there's something kind of like subliminal that we do in real life. Like, if you're walking and talking, there is a kind of rhythm to like whenever you step. It's kind of like if I'm saying a sentence and then I step on every other word or whatever. It would be kind of weird if you stepped on certain words. So it's kind of finding which words are satisfying for that step to happen on. And so that is the second thing I would do once I figured out the layout, is to plan what words the foot would be landing on. So I would kind of write, you know, like the whole dialogue out, the whole dialogue of the shot, and then I would like underline maybe like whatever words the character would be stepping on, and also what foot, if it's the right foot or the left foot. So this is all like going into the planning before I've even started like putting any poses, and before I've even like started recording any reference. So basically, I've done the layout, I've figured out the speed, and then I've figured out what words I want the character to step on. And so I have all of that kind of plan in my mind before I go to record the reference, as well as obviously all the acting that the director wants us to achieve within the scene with the character. This is more just like planning the mechanics of it. and so with that in mind, I would then go on and kind of record some references. I like to do like some close-ups for the face, because I find that useful when I'm like putting the facial acting in the shot later. But I like to do like a full body performance, so I can see like all the footwork, especially in a shot like this, because you can see the full character. I think it's important to see um, the whole body. And so, yeah, essentially going with the plan, I shot the reference, trying to keep it natural, but also having to land on the rhythm that I had set up. And you can see here actually, one thing I like to do in my references is give them different options. So in the option on the left here, you can see that the character stops walking maybe about halfway down the stairs. And in the option on the right here, the character keeps walking the whole way down the stairs during the performance. Now, my idea with this was actually usually like with my versions, it's like for different types of performances. But this came from when I was planning the layout. I felt that kind of having because the character starts quite high up on these stairs, so he's got quite a nice kind of like position in screen space that's like a position of power. He's high up, and the people he's talking to are nice and low. And that like made the character feel quite powerful. And so one of the ideas I had originally for the shot was to stop the character somewhere around here. So he takes like a little pause on the stairs. And then at the end of his speech, he carries on walking, so it hooks up to the next shot. And so that would essentially allow us to keep the character at a higher platform. So he retains that position of power compositionally in the shot. So that's like an idea we played around with. But ultimately, the director felt that he preferred having the character continuously move towards the characters he's speaking to, as like a different version of like him like imposing his power. He's always kind of like progressing towards them, and so that's ultimately what we ended up doing for the shot. But for example, like being able to have these conversations saves a lot of time, and if you can show those options early, then you can kind of save yourself some time not having to redo it a bunch of times. But these are kind of things that you can think of in the early stages while you're planning and shooting the reference. And then once the plan is kind of set, it's mainly just about like I knew when the character's going to step throughout all of these 3 shots, so that was all figured out. And then it was just about kind of like finding the performance that we wanted for the specific character. So the director usually would give you a good like set of instructions, guidance of what he wants to achieve within the shot, what emotions he wants to come across, and kind of taken those. But this was also like one of the first times we were animating this character, and so I was looking to just give him some interesting things to do in his performance. One of the references we had was this man from Rob Roy, which is a great old movie from Liam Neeson, and essentially he's kind of this kind of sort of a little bit more flamboyant, a little bit more feminine character, but he's really like competent, and he's really like deadly in the way he in his abilities. So he's sword fighting here, and he's doing pretty well actually. And so that's kind of like some of the reference that we got for the character, that they wanted him, not necessarily to come across like threatening immediately, but like he is quite competent in like what he can do.
So you shoot the reference first and then show it to the director, or you do the blocking first, like the layout?
Oh no, I would well, at least it depends. Different productions do it slightly differently, but in our case, we were able to show the director the reference for the most part. But if not the director, then you would show your supervisor at least. And the supervisor is pretty well connected with the director, so they would be able to give you pretty good guidance. But I would always recommend to show your reference clips or reference videos to the supervisor early, to be able to talk through different options, and that way you reduce the amount of work you have to do. You're making sure that you're all on the same page about what you're going to animate before you jump into the animation. So I definitely recommend that.
I just wanted to tell, like, we can just reconnect with the same link, because this is going to be disconnected in certain few seconds.
Oh, I see.
So we'll just reconnect it again.
Okay.
I'll just reconnect again.
Should do that now. Let's see. All right.
What you do is, sometimes you do the blocking first and sometimes you do the referencing first. Depending
no, I would say most of the time I do my reference first, unless it's like a shot where you can't really do the mechanics, like if it's someone doing a backflip and then flying off of something, then I would in that case I would maybe even like draw something, draw some thumbnails real quick, just to figure out maybe like some of the poses. But I would like you always should start with some kind of plan, because 3D animation takes a lot of time, like putting all the poses down, and sometimes like the rigs can be like a bit slower or things like that. So it takes quite a bit of time. So I would recommend as much as possible like having a plan, having a clear plan when you're going, before you go into the software. And essentially, like I think a lot of people, including myself, like I used to do this, I would enjoy animation so much that I would be happy to jump into the software and figure out all the problems in Maya or Blender or whatever. But when you're doing that like in a professional environment, that's fine for like personal work, if you want to like kind of figure out the problems in 3D in the software. But when you're like working professionally at a studio under like a deadline and a quota, it's super important to have like a clear plan of like what you want to do, so that you're not wasting, like you're wasting as little time as you can.
Yes.
And so I highly recommend either like shooting some kind of video reference, or doing some thumbnail sketches, so you figure out things like what foot should the character be on, how many steps, what kind of acting they'll be doing, what angle their body will be in. And that's it.
Things like, what are, if I talk about animation, then if you approach or if you do an animation shot, then what is the thing which you take most care of while doing the animation?
For me, it's really those storytelling poses, and the just having like a blueprint, a plan for the overall shot. So for this shot in particular, it's exactly like the things I had been talking about, which was figuring out what steps, what foot, and also just like the layout of the shot. I think those are like the two biggest things you'd have to take care of, like up front, like even before you start diving into the nuances of the performance. Like those things have to work. Otherwise, they'll be distracting, and people won't be able to actually focus on like looking at the character's performance, because there'll be something like more obvious that's weird for them to look at. But in general, like if it was a shot that's just like a character just standing and talking, for example, there's not much movement. In that case, it's mainly getting the emotional like the emotional beats that you want to get across. And you can think about that in terms of like the subtext of the shot as well, like what the character's saying, but what the character's thinking. Getting both the emotional beats and the subtext to come across clearly in the first few poses you do. And one way I kind of like double check that is I'll set those first few poses, however many it is, like 3 or 4 that I need for the shot, and I'll just like flip between those poses without the in-betweens. And I used to be into comic books, like I said, so it's almost like think of it as reading a comic book. You're just looking at one picture, then the next picture, and the next picture, and you're asking yourself, does this tell the story that I want it to tell, like of the character? Am I getting the character's like thought process across in these like 3 or 4 poses or whatever? And if the answer is yes, then you've done your job and you can move to the next stage. If the answer is no, something's missing, I'm not getting enough information, then I would either like revisit the poses and see how I can make them clearer, or sometimes maybe you do need to add like maybe like an extra pose in the middle or something. But yeah, I would say that's that's why I spend the biggest amount of time. And actually, a cool thing about the Richard Williams book, that book is essentially full of walk cycles. But what I really learned from that book is beyond just like how to do a walk cycle, it's how to think about animation. That's like, I think that's the biggest thing you can learn from that book, is how to think about animation. Because whether it's a walk cycle that you're doing or whether it's like an acting shot you're doing, the way like the book teaches you to break down the motion, I think still applies to like all of those. So in a walk, you would start with the extremes, which is like the legs out wide, and that's essentially the storytelling pose of a walk, because you're telling the story of someone putting their foot out in front of them and getting ready to travel somewhere, and then you're telling the story of that the other foot getting in front of it. So, and then you break that down with an in between, with the foot, something like that. And just the way you approach doing a walk, I think a lot of that same mentality can be used to an acting shot of someone talking and changing emotions. You would start with that first emotion, then you get to the next emotion, and then maybe there's something in between, like showing which is leading. Like there's the thought lead, or there's, do they hear something else, and that catches their attention. And so, yeah, so I still use a lot of those principles from the Richard Williams book, both for acting and mechanics. Like it's all connected.
Sometimes I think that how crazy is this animation? So when we don't know anything, we never think about these things. And when we get into this as an animator, then we have to think about so many minute things, how to deliver the performance. Even an eye that plays so much important role, that like if we tell this to a layman, then he would be surprised. He would feel like, what?
Yeah, it's true.
In so much detail.
It's true, and that's the thing that can overwhelm, especially new animators, and even experienced animators sometimes. But that's why I think it's important to really like slow everything down. Like if you have a crazy shot, just first of all, just like think, what's the most important thing I need to get across to the audience? And then, figure that out. Like if it's in the layout or the first few poses, just figure that stuff out. And then it's almost like I feel like art in general, like art and music and like a lot of the kind of the arts essentially, all like come from the same basic principle, which is like to set. You start with a base, and then you build on top of it, and then you build on top of it, build on top of it, and then in the end you have a sculpture. But that sculpture started with like a cube block or something, or ball or whatever, and then you kind of chisel, and then it looks like a beautiful sculpture. Or like a painting, you start with a base color, and then you go on top of that, add the shading, add the highlights, and then you have a great painting that looks like a photograph. And it's exactly the same with animation. Like you start with like the very, very basic, and you make sure that those foundations work well. Using a walk as an example again, you start with just those like extreme poses of the walk, making sure like it feels like the way you want the character to walk. Like how wide are their steps going to be? Is it going to be small steps, big steps? You get that to feel right, and then if that feels right, you go to the next step where you add like the poses in between. If that feels right, you go to the next step, and working in that way essentially always makes the next step feel smaller and smaller and smaller, and you're essentially just thinking, oh, I'm just adding like two poses for the two extremes of the walk, and then you're like, oh, I'm just adding a few poses in the middle just to get the passing pose to feel right, and then it's like, oh, I'm just adjusting the spacing of the foot lifting off the floor. So it's always just like a little step and a little next step and a little next step, and that way you don't get overwhelmed into like, oh, what, like, I'm doing a whole walk and like the arms have to swing while the foot's doing the thing and the thing, and that can just get you like overwhelmed instantly if you're thinking about the whole picture. You're trying to paint a final picture on your first go, as opposed to just like setting the base colors first and then working on top of that and on top of that. And so yeah, I really recommend both, like as you're learning animation and as you're getting into your shots, like taking your time to set up the foundations right, because if you do set them right, every next step is just going to be like easier and easier and easier until you get to the finished thing. And that's why it's important to also spend the time at the beginning setting those first few poses and the plan of the shot, because once you're done with that, that's going to be pretty much the hardest bit, and it will just get easier and easier, and you just have that kind of like feeling of reward and like, I can't wait to get to the finish line, as opposed to being in a situation where you jump too far into the shot at the start, and maybe you're doing like some like fine little movement right at the beginning, and then you find out it doesn't work with like the thing, the rest of the shot later, and it's just a mess.
So what is the timeline? How much time did you get to animate this shot?
Oh, so it changes from
For
it
this
changes from
shot,
yeah, so it changes from show to show, but for the Sea Beast, I think we had about I don't remember anymore. We had something like, so like three. Hold on, I'm trying to do math. Do I want to say 3 seconds?
maybe if you can
Nah,
have
it was maybe like, yeah, 2.5. So maybe like 2.5 seconds of animation per week. But like around something like that. But there was a lot of like technical stuff on the Sea Beast. So sometimes it would just go over that. Sometimes it would go under that. For these shots, luckily I didn't
So
I
this is
think
what
I
you're saying is 2.5 seconds per week or per day.
per per week
Okay.
per week. Yeah, it's very slow. So yeah, usually like at the bigger studios, you do have like the time you need um to refine things and make them look the way they're supposed to look. But it's still important to essentially like if maybe if by the end I spent like maybe like a 2 to 3 week period like working on like these shots, like if that's like the full time I spent working on it, it's not like uh essentially that's not you can't just say uh like they give you the shot, they say all right, you have like 3 weeks to like animate the shot. You can't say okay cool and then like not talk to them for 1 week, not talk to them for 2 weeks, and then you come on like the third week and say hey, here's my shot. Like you've got to be like showing it to them like, you know, as often as you can, almost every day. And so even though there is like a good amount of time to work on a shot, sometimes it can be even like over a month. Even though there's like a good amount of time to work on a shot, um,
So when
there's still an element of speed.
this thing.
Exactly, there's still an element of speed and an urgency for you to get the ideas in front of the animation team. And so that's why kind of planning and doing things like reference that can show your ideas really quick are still important, even in an environment where you have a lot of time.
So what about this lip sync and expressions? How do you do that? Like gradually you do in the blocking stage as well, or you take it to the well you do at the time of the second thing?
Yeah, I I guess I'm a bit random, but
Like
I would try to.
what is your process? How do you, if I talk about like give some pointers that you do the shot in this way. So how would you like to share the pointers? Just up to the mark, just the pointers. First you do this, then you do this, then you do this. Like that way you can mention.
Okay, for just for the acting.
Yes, if I
And
talk about acting shot then.
okay, for facial performance, usually I film the reference, so I know generally what the head and the body will be doing, and that way I can first focus on just the body, and get the body doing roughly what I want it to do. And when I'm happy with that, then I kind of just maybe do a little camera on the head, which is why I have the little head references in my video references. And I can just focus on just the face from that point. So even the head accents would have been kind of like figured out. And I can just focus on like the face. And in terms of the face as well, I usually do that part of the face first, like just the eyes, the eye acting and the brows, adding the accents where I want them. So if someone is saying something like, "Oh, that's so great," like I know that the "so" in the audio is where like the mouth opens and makes a big sound. So maybe I'll like mirror that accent with like the eyes like opening up. Um, and so I'll do the eye first, the eye mask first, and then when that's done and I'm happy with that, I do the mouth last, because essentially I like to think of the mouth shape a little bit more in a 2D animation sense. And so if like I'm turned this way, you have to design the mouth shapes a little bit differently to if the character was facing this way. If you want to get like some nice appealing shapes. And so that's why I try to leave that as late as I can, so that I know exactly what angle the mouth is at when it's doing that sound, so that I can design it to that angle. And I have a whole process for doing lip sync, but I guess we can talk about that later. I don't
So
know if
I
this
just
time.
wanted to know process. How do you follow? Like at the beginning, you plan the shot, then you do the layout, like the main
Mhm.
pose. Then while doing that poses, do you add some expressions in those poses as well?
Yeah.
Yes.
So if I do add facial expressions during the blocking stage, it's usually rough. Like it's just to maybe like sell it to the director or whoever's looking at it. But it's not really poses that I would keep
Yes.
for the final facial performance. Some of them I might keep, but in general, it's just to sell like whatever is happening with the rest of the body, so that the character doesn't look dead. But for the final like facial performance, I usually save that for maybe like once the body is more splined, is when I would properly do the facial performance. And that's something to think about too, that I didn't know when I was a student necessarily, is that like just because you put a pose down before doesn't mean you can't change it anymore. So yeah, there's a lot of people that put poses down and then they're like, yeah, I'll change it completely later. So yeah,
We get blocked in our head that yes, this is something I put and I don't need to change that later on.
yeah.
So if you would like to share any of your other work as well, if any of the shots you have other than the sea beast, you would really like to see.
Sure. So I had a little mixture prepared here. I'll just skip to the last one. Let's see. So this one was like an example of like an acting shot, essentially. So that's a little bit more kind of traditional, just like film your reference, see how you're acting, and like follow that as a blueprint. And then there's like shots.
We
Hmm?
can have the shot first, like we can see the full shot and then we can talk about it.
Yeah. And so this was an example of something that's more body mechanics, I guess. So here we have like three characters interacting together. They're on a boat, which is also a character, on the ocean, which is also affecting their posture, their weights, and things like that. So that's this is a shot where, for example, I did film reference, but a lot of it was also drawing because obviously I didn't have a boat or the ocean. So for a lot of the stuff with uh, the little fish uh, and the girl being lifted into the boat and things like that, I did a lot of drawing for that to figure it out.
I have seen, like I'm not able to see the screen.
Oh my bad.
I was thinking,
uh,
talking and I just I realized that
sorry. You should have stopped me earlier. Here we go.
we can see the shot first and then
All right, so this is a shot that I had added to the list here for like an example of like something that's more focused on body mechanics. And so there's like you have like three characters interacting together on the ocean with a boat, which is also affected by the water, and the boat is affected by their weight shifts. And so like everything is like connected. And so this is a shot that like you really need to plan for all those things. And for a shot like this, I did film some reference, but I also did a lot of drawing to figure out things like how she's going to get pulled into the boat, how this fish is going to jump up onto the boat, things like that. Just using any tool I can that I have, just to plan as much as possible, because these shots are all very much like if one thing changes, everything else changes. Like if they say we want him to be slower, that means that this stick won't be here at this time, and that means they have to swim at a different timing to reach the stick at the right time, things like that. And even the smaller things like, for example, as you can see, this fish is leading her because it's in front of her and it's pulling her forward. But she has to reach the stick ahead of the fish. So even just getting them to switch positions from her being behind him to her being in front of him, so she can reach the stick and the fish doesn't bump into the stick. Just even little things like that you don't think about. Like you have to plan, you have to plan for it to be smooth so that people don't notice all the magic that's happening, basically. But that doesn't all happen for free. So, so definitely like planning, whether it's an acting shot or something like this, is super important. It will save you a lot of time and a lot of work. But that's essentially just the secret, is planning and then a lot of hard work in between just to get it
I
all
think
to flow.
mechanics is quite difficult than the acting sort. Like
Yeah, yeah, it takes more time. It takes more time. But they both have their like difficulties. But just body mechanics in general just take more time because there's just a lot more of the physicality to kind of focus on. And yeah, that just takes more time in general. And then I'm kind of going to just move quickly to the next one. So this is the third type of shot. Cool. And so this one is one I would call motion graphics. So the first one being more of an acting shot, where you're focusing on like the character's performance predominantly. The second one being mainly like physicalities of like characters working with each other. But this one I would call motion graphics because it's really most of the shot is about like the design of how all of the things are flying into screen and interacting with the camera. And so that's where most of the entertainment and the focus of the shot is, in a shot kind of like this, is the kind of motion graphics of it. You can also think of maybe like, in a way, if you have maybe like a shot of Spider-Man swinging through the air, that can sometimes be thought of as a bit of a motion graphics shot as well, because you're essentially just trying to, within the like camera space that you have, you're trying to design some like interesting motion. And for something like this, main thing, like I said, because it's so much about the camera, the biggest thing you want to focus on is, first of all, like the layout, because it's all about the camera. So you want to make sure you lock in the layout that you need. So if you need to make any adjustments to like the character, then I would do that first. And I usually work sometimes with just like a cube. So instead of having even the character, I would just have like a cube in Maya, and just like move that around, and get the sort of choreography I want between the camera and this cube. And kind of once the energy feels right is what you're looking for, mostly is the energy. Once the energy feels right, then you can start kind of like add in some poses and things like that to the shot. But yeah, it's really about like designing things towards the camera. And something like a good cheat, let's say, something I do when I work with like motion graphics shots like this sometimes is, for example, if we look at this thing in the background here that's coming out from behind the door, and then interacting with the character. So with something like this, one thing you can do is you can actually use the motion path tool in Maya that like allows you to kind of draw like a curve on the screen, and then you can kind of constrain an object to that curve, so the object follows that that path basically. So you can use tools like that essentially, and it's kind of complicated, but you make a curve that looks like the the trail that you want the object to follow. But then you can also constrain that curve to the camera so that no matter what the camera movement is, that object in screen space, and it's important to think about things in screen space, that object in screen space is still following this nice smooth curve. So you get this really nice kind of appealing path to the object that will feel quite dynamic and maybe like 2D, kind of working in that way. That's something you can do.
So this motion graphic shot is also the background objects which are there, which are also animated by the animators, or
Yeah, for sure. And actually, some of the things, some of the tools I like to use to think of motion, like stuff like this, where like it's almost a challenge to make the shot like fun, fun for yourself. So like when I'm working with things like this, for example, just to give you some context on this shot. So in the movie, at this point, the character is trying to escape from this room. She's in danger, and all these like black and red things are like robots, basically. But they're kind of like they're not fully formed. They're just like forming, and so like some things I played around with, for example, is like here at the beginning when they first enter the room, they form this shape, which is kind of like inspired by like the Eye of Sauron from like Lord of the Rings and all those things. And so that's essentially the character saying, I see you, because it's like the eye. And then as you get these pieces coming here, they on the walls, it's telling us that they're like infiltrating the room, but even beyond that, they're like designed. Let me see, find a good frame. Like here, maybe they're designed like kind of based on the USB logo, like USB in your computer. And so that's like keeping with the theme that they're kind of like connecting to the room. And so there's like lots of interesting themes you can like mix into the designs of the shapes to keep it like fun and interesting, and in a way like it almost makes it feel more like believable, because it's referencing like imagery and like motifs that you've seen in the world in other places. And yeah, but beyond that, you're just creating like chaos in the shot, but the chaos has some like thought behind it. So even in like a shot like this with motion graphics, there's still like a lot of that planning and things like that that go into it. And you're still thinking in terms of like the story, like, you know, like all of these shapes are there for a reason. And so yeah, that's kind of like three different types of shots, but a lot of them like have the same basics and principles in the way I'm like thinking about them. Planning is key. And yeah.
what would you like to suggest to the beginners, whoever is trying to, maybe they have, oh yes, if they have heard about this animation, then what would you like to suggest those students who are just very, very beginners?
I would say I would say I would recommend first of all, I would recommend the Richard Williams book. I think that's a great tool for learning to get into, well, especially like if we're talking about like like teaching yourself kind of thing, rather than going to an online school. I would recommend the Richard Williams book, because that's a really good tool for kind of just understanding how to plan animation. So that book really helps. And then beyond that, I would say it's cool to like jump into animation and like fully kind of enjoy enjoy what the craft is. Like, you know, when you start, you want to do like some crazy shots with like 10 characters doing backflips and like a 30-minute dialogue or whatever. Everyone wants to do that when they start off, because you know it seems cool. But and so it's fine to do that. You know, you can do a little bit of that too, but just don't forget to prioritize like learning the foundations, learning the basics, because if you have a strong like grasp of the basics, like weight, timing, spacing, arcs, doing like the bouncing ball exercise. If you have a strong understand like grasp of those foundations early on, that will like really help you, and then you can like gradually learn to do those crazy shots as you get into your career. But if you speed through the basics, then you're kind of going to be like really you're going to have to learn it like while you're working, and there's less time to learn that stuff while you're working, so you'll be a little bit more stressed out, and maybe sometimes it leads to people like, yeah, I guess just kind of stressing out a little bit more during their career, if they haven't uh, kind of dedicated that time to learn the basics. One thing I used to do when I was learning is sometimes I would just do exercises. I wouldn't even call it animation. It's literally just like an exercise, just to understand sort of like how maybe breakdown poses work in between poses. I would just have like a character, just a spine, not like the character's not performing, not doing any acting. There's no footwork or anything. I'll just have maybe like one pose here and like one pose the other way, and then I'll see like how I would do like the breakdown in between, and I'll just have just that as like an exercise. It's not like to show anyone. It's just for me to understand and be able to do it like a lot of times quickly. And so I'll just do a little exercise like that. Or if you're always wondering like, oh, how does like overlap work with like the arm and the hand and the fingers? Just do a little exercise with just that. We just like, you hide the rest of the character and you just have like the arm maybe, and you can do like little overlaps. Just essentially like being honest with yourself on whatever you feel that you don't fully understand. So maybe you've been doing like full animations, but you're always struggling with like either like a walk, or you're always struggling with like doing some blinks that feel nice. Just focus on that one little thing, one little area that you're struggling with, and just do little exercises on that. It can be like quick little 15 minutes. You don't need to do a whole shot for that. It can just be like a quick little 15 minutes, and just practicing that regularly will help you kind of understand and get a better grasp of like that stuff, so that when you eventually have to do it in the studio, it'll just be, second nature, more comfortable.
Great talking to you. And thank you so much for coming here and sharing your knowledge. I guess it's almost an hour, and thank you for
Yeah,
sharing your time. If you would like
thanks
to
so much.
add on some things from your end, then you can surely add.
I don't know. I think I've said I think I've said it all. But thank you so much for having me on your channel. And yeah, you're doing some amazing work. I wish that I had found someone like you when I was studying. Yeah, so I think I've said it all, but I just want to say thank you for having me on your channel. Thank you for the amazing work you're doing. I wish I'd had someone like you uh, when I was studying animation, so I could kind of have access to some of these resources. But yeah, I think it's going to be really useful for a lot of students.
Thank you for your kind words, and I really appreciate that. I'm really grateful to you, first of all. I know that we might not do that quality of animation which is done in the production studios and that level. But yes, this is something which is even more important than learning that kind of animation at the beginning level. So this is, I feel this is even more important than that stuff. So it is very much important to get clarity what you really want in life, how to approach that thing, whatever you want to do. Suppose if you want to, if you're making up your mind as to do animation, then there should be a person to guide you in the right way so that you can fast track your growth. Anyways, you have to invest your time, you have to invest your money, you have to invest your efforts. But if there is somebody, then you can have the correct path, which is already being traveled by somebody. So that way we can help people, we can improve the society as well. I am doing these good things. You are sharing your time. So this is really, really great. And we have just connected through social media, and I feel really grateful about that. I thank universe that you came to my universe and shared this knowledge and your time. So thank you for that. I really, really appreciate it.
It was a pleasure. And I think you said something really important that as well. Uh, if you're a student and you have questions, there's social media. Like you can reach out to a lot of animators. They're just regular people like all of us. So if you have questions, you can just find your favorite animator and then send them a message online, and ask them about any questions you have about animation as well. With social media these days, it's really easy to connect with people and talk to them.
Absolutely. So what's your plan for the day?
Oh man. Well, actually, yeah, I'm on holiday, so I'm gonna be enjoying some of that beautiful Vancouver sunshine.
Your birthday?
Oh no, sunshine. I'm on holiday.
Okay.
Um,
I heard that it's your birthday.
oh no,
So I was
it
like,
could be.
great.
But yeah, no, yeah, I'm just gonna enjoy the sunshine. It's been a lot of months of kind of like working. So now that I finally have a little bit of a break, it's good to take
Enjoy your
some
day.
downtime. Yeah.
Enjoy your day, and we might meet again to this. And yes, see you. Take care.
Thank you, and you too.
So much.
Have a good
Have a good
evening.
day. Yes, I will have a good night, and you have a
Yeah.
great day. I wish you have a great day. I wish you have great success in life. And thank you so much for coming in.
Thanks so much for having me.
Okay.
All right. See
See you.
you.
Take care. God bless you.
Hey.